I would like to welcome Carlo Cariaga to Deep Power CEO Chat this week. Carlo is the editor-in-chief for Think Geoenergy, one of the largest online publications of geothermal energy news. Think Geoenergy delivers business-to-business news with a focus on development, technology, finance, and related topics, paired with market analysis and events, informing and connecting players in the international geothermal energy market. Previous to Carlo's position at Think Energy, he was a geochemist at Energy Development Corporation. Carlo, welcome to Deep Power.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, Carlo, you have an interesting background. You started as a geochemist and then somehow ended up being the editor-in-chief at an online news publication. Tell me about your background as a geochemist and how you got interested in that industry, and then subsequently how you ended up at Think Geoenergy.
Okay, so it's quite a long story. My background is in chemical engineering. So I graduated from university back in 2008. My first job was in manufacturing, as most engineers go. But then after a few years, I started looking for something that was a bit bigger than me, as other people would say, like something that was an advocacy that was more important than just generating profit for a company. So then I found Energy Development Corporation, which is the largest geothermal developer in the Philippines. At that time, they were very aggressive on expansion projects, especially in international fronts. So they had to expand their team as well. And so they were hiring for exploration geoscientists. And I happened to apply for a geochemist position, got the job in 2012. At that time, there were a lot of surveys. I remember going to doing field work all over the Philippines and also in Indonesia and Taiwan. So there was a lot of exposure, and I found that this was a very worthwhile industry. Like I was looking forward to maybe discovering a new project. During all those exploration work, it was also a chance for me to learn how to bridge scientific knowledge with community engagement. When you're in the field, you're basically the de facto representative of the company. So you had to explain a lot of perhaps complicated science to a general audience. So that was maybe part of the skill set that I learned as a geochemist. I worked as an exploration geochemist for something more than 6 years. I left EDC in 2018. There were a lot of personal reasons for that, but mostly because I had personal plans that were no longer aligned with that kind of career. So I did freelance work. I happened to be able to write well also. So I did a lot of work making content for tech websites. So I dabbled into a lot of things. Like I was interested in 3D printing. I was interested in drones. So stuff like that. But then I mean I knew of Think Geoenergy way before that point where I got hired. Even when I was a new hire in an EDC, I think Geoenergy was one of our primary sources for research. It was something that was reliable, something that we knew was accurate when we found it on Think Geoenergy. So when I heard that Alexander Richter, the owner of Think Geoenergy, was looking for someone to help him make content for the website, I messaged him, and that's how I started with Think Geoenergy.
Wow, I think it's interesting how those paths converge, and it's also interesting that you mentioned something that I've heard a lot of people say, like they just didn't feel satisfied anymore at their job. And it's interesting that within the geothermal energy, that seems to be a theme that people leave past employers to go try to change the world or make an impact. So I can see why you did that. And Think Geoenergy is definitely a large publication. I know it's very important. So tell me about what is the goal for Think Geoenergy? What's your purpose? What is your goal at that publication?
Well, for a long time, Think Geoenergy has pretty much been the number one source of news for geothermal stories. This was the initial objective for Think Geoenergy back when Alex started it in 2008. Back then, there really wasn't a media outlet that consolidated stories about the geothermal industry. So he created this website. It was, as he always says, it was an accidental business for him. It just turned out that there was an audience for it, and that's still what we do right now. We provide a platform that consolidates geothermal news. So it's a combination of research. Some of it, a lot of companies also engage with us to help them broadcast publications or their new projects, or if there's an opportunity for other companies to collaborate with them. So Think Geoenergy grew up through the years. It evolved from just a news platform into a platform for collaborative work. Um, we have a lot of readers who find jobs through Think Geoenergy, and also personally, my mission with Think Geoenergy is to help make the geothermal topics more accessible to a general audience. Like, I find that the industry really needs science communicators. The industry is innately very technical, very science based. So just being able to translate all that information into something that's more palatable, that's more easily understandable, that's quite a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My experience has been when I speak with people who are not in the industry about geothermal, their typical response is, "Oh, my uncle, he heats his pool with geothermal." And while that is an application, that's not really the full breadth of what the potential geothermal is. And so I'm grateful for publications like yours, because it does provide greater clarification, information. And I think it's interesting that within a new industry, which I would say geothermal is not necessarily new, it's been around for hundreds of years, the basics of it, but in terms of the real potential of super hot rock, for example, it's important for an industry to work together, right? Because although there's competition among other vendors or different companies, in order to really make the movement that's needed in terms of lobbying with government, local, state, federal governments, or just pushing the possibility, it is important to come together. That's how I see Think Geothermal as a publication, is kind of a like you said, a platform that people can look to for that news. So I'm grateful for that. But do you see it as important for an industry to work together when it's kind of nascent like geothermal is?
Well, if you've been following geothermal news lately, you might have noticed that have been a lot of stories of companies forming joint ventures, strategic partnerships, universities doing collaborative research work. So this is something that the industry seems to be very aware of, that collaboration is very important. The thing about the challenges of geothermal is that they are usually multifaceted. Like, you have technological limitations, you have social acceptance issues, you have financial challenges, you might run into legal challenges as well. So that's the nature of developing a geothermal project. It usually requires a multidisciplinary approach. So this is something that the recent trend of collaborations has been working on, and I think it's been fairly successful.
That's wonderful. And I do follow your publication, obviously, and I have seen those joint ventures, which are unique to this space, and I think are helpful. Do you feel there are any misconceptions about the geothermal energy space that's holding the industry back as a whole?
I think generally, the major challenge or misconception that the industry is facing is that not many people are aware of how versatile geothermal is. So maybe there are a lot of people that know about power generation, or maybe there are a lot of people that know about heat generation, but there still are other ways to use geothermal. Geothermal heat systems can also be used for cooling or air conditioning. So this is something that is being worked on in areas like Chile or Spain. And also there are a lot of industrial uses for geothermal. So this geothermal heating for greenhouse or agricultural sites are very common in the Netherlands and also in Germany. We also have enterprises using geothermal heat for industrial uses, say food drying. Um, there's a business in New Zealand that uses geothermal to create powdered milk. In more tropical countries, we use geothermal for timber drying. There are even breweries that use geothermal heat for the hot side of making beer. So it's quite versatile. And then there are also the up and coming applications of geothermal, say for lithium extraction. We have production of green hydrogen. We have carbon capture. So these haven't been developed yet, but these are being actively researched on. That's something that I don't think a lot of people know about geothermal.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that is a pretty wide and broad application set for geothermal, and that is exciting. You again mentioned wanting to make an impact, which is why you came to think geothermal and becoming a geochemist initially. But what gets you excited really about the geothermal energy space?
Oh, okay. The usual answer to that question is that there is a lot of research going on right now in terms of geothermal technology. Like there are a lot of new frontiers being explored. But then what I've noticed in the past year or so is that there has been a huge influx of oil and gas players expressing interest in geothermal. So you have developers previously of oil and gas projects. You have service providers. You have um, suppliers of casing for wells that previously served the oil and gas industry exclusively that are now trying to look for geothermal clients. So this goes to show that there is a lot of attention going to geothermal right now, which has not been around in the previous years. I mean, even oil and gas giants like Shell and Chevron have recently joined the geothermal industry in minor ways. So I think that's fairly exciting, and I think that's a way to accelerate geothermal development in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate those answers. For me personally, what gets me excited is the potential to just totally revolutionize the energy market. Where historically at the oil and Earth's energy was controlled by whether it's the rich or the powerful or governments. And we've seen what history has showed us is that usually they're not treated very fairly. And there's a disparity between those that have access to energy and that cost. So for me, even though it's a pretty bold, expensive, and time-consuming endeavor, I use this word. I would really like to help see the democratization of energy consumption and the availability of energy, right? And what's so cool to me is that if you could have, if you could drill a hole 5-6 miles into the earth and provide localized, always-on energy for a small town or community in Africa, right? That's just such a game changer. I can't stop thinking about it, and that's why we've been so dedicated on our research with our partner at the University of Oklahoma to try to help accomplish that. But it's also been clear that there are hurdles, whether that's governmental, perceptual, environmental. What hurdles do you see are really keeping the geothermal energy space from advancing?
When it comes to hurdles, I always think that there are also multifaceted hurdles for geothermal. But my top three would be the high capital involved in developing geothermal projects, the risks of drilling, and also the challenges of social acceptance. So, geothermal projects are expensive. You have a very long development period. I'd say 5 years is very short for a project. During that time, you have to spend a lot of money, and also the most expensive part of development is also the riskiest part of it, which is drilling. So a lot of projects don't even get to that point, or sometimes they fail at that point and they don't push through. So I think these two problems can be solved with um, financial incentives, policy changes. So that's a very important component of encouraging geothermal development. And the third problem is social acceptance. So yeah, even now we have a lot of news of communities resisting geothermal projects. You have, I mean, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the recent news. There have been lawsuits in Nevada against geothermal projects there. So there's still a lot of resistance to it. I think this is something that can be addressed with education, with better information exchange, engagement with communities, and also we as an industry also have to do better in terms of addressing concerns of the public when it comes to geothermal projects. A lot of these are actually valid, like seismic effects because of drilling, gases from geothermal wells. A lot of these are valid, but these hazards can be mitigated. That's something. That's the mission that we need to give out to the communities.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with you on that. I think it's interesting that when we're talking about a clean source of renewable energy, I mean, geothermal can't get any better than that, right? But to your point, you know, the misconception or the perception is that 80% of drilling to tap geothermal is basic oil and gas industry, right? So to your point, I don't know if a lot of people see a difference of the environmental impact because it does look like just another oil well for 80% of the route, right? And then the last maybe 10% you're tapping through the super hard rock or trying to access geothermal. So it is going to be an uphill challenge to educate that public. I would agree with you in that, you know, while it might look like traditional oil drilling, it is providing a cleaner source of renewable that has, you know, very little, if any, carbon footprint. So again, publications like yours will be crucial in helping educate the public. And I also agree with you in terms of government subsidies. You know, there's studies that show perhaps the solar industry never would have been adopted had the government not pushed so many subsidies over the years, tax credits and such. And so where geothermal is probably, or it is far more reliable and useful power source, without some form of government help, it will be hard to fully adopt this. And I don't love government intervention, but I do know that could be important. But again, I just want to thank you for the efforts at Think Geoenergy. I hope that we're able to produce enough newsworthy technology or advancements that we could be covered. But I encourage all of our viewers that watch this show to go to thinkgeoenergy.com, be aware of the changes, you know, celebrate all the other advancements of the other companies throughout the world, because it's important for all of us. But finally, I guess we all like competition, and you know, the Olympics bring the world together to compete. If you were to say one country is more advanced or is further ahead or is the furthest ahead in terms of geothermal energy advancement, could you say what country that is? Do you have one that's leading the pack?
That is tough to say, but in terms of installed capacity, US still has the number one spot.
Do you see any other governments being more favorable or more willing to work with geothermal than the US?
Well, for the usual suspects, I mean, you have the US, you have Indonesia, you have the Philippines. These countries still have a lot of potential. The good thing about these countries is that they're mostly working on expansion of existing sites, so it's fairly low risk. But if there's a country that I'm very excited on, it's Kenya. Like Kenya still has a lot of potential. They're working on a lot of projects right now simultaneously. So in the coming, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, there's probably a lot of additional capacity expected in Kenya.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's great to hear. And I'm assuming, is there any news on your site about Kenya and what they're doing there?
Oh yeah, there are a lot. So
Okay,
yeah,
we'll have to go.
I mean, there's probably 2 power plants being constructed right now.
Okay, great. Well, Carlo, again, thank you for your time. We look forward to working with you in the future. And for everyone that's watching this show, go to the website, become educated, and continue to follow alerts as new news comes out. So, Carlo, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the time.